I was joined earlier by a resident of Minneapolis who happens to be John Hinderaker of the Power Line blog. John Hinderaker, thank you so much indeed for joining me. How are you calling the result?
Well, I predicted that President Trump would be reelected, and I still think that's probably going to happen, but it's going to be pretty close. You know, it depends on several key states. I'd say it's probably 55-45, that Trump is going to be reelected. The only result so far that has surprised me was Arizona. I expected Trump to carry Arizona, and it looks like Biden is probably winning that state. Otherwise, every state that's been called has gone the way I expected it to.
Now, it may come down to a battle for Pennsylvania, Biden's home state. How's that looking for you, do you think?
It's really interesting. Right now, President Trump has a big lead in Pennsylvania. I know from the Trump campaign that they expected to start today, election day, trailing by 750,000 votes. That's based on this early mail-in voting and so on that the states are doing. They also expected that on election day, they would get more than 1 million more votes than Joe Biden. So they expected to win Pennsylvania by something like 250,000 votes. And they are way ahead right now with about 52% or so of the votes counted. What we don't know is what are the votes that have been counted, how many of them are today's votes, and how many of them are the early mail-in votes. But for what it's worth, right now, Trump does have a big lead.
Now, even if Trump does still lose, and we can't rule that out at all, the polls have wildly underestimated his chances. Why do you think that is?
I've gotten cynical, Andrew. I really have. I wouldn't have said this 4 years ago. I think that the polls that most of the pollsters took in the summer and early fall were deliberately skewed. You know, pollsters don't report their raw numbers. They weight the numbers based on a turnout model that predicts what the electorate is going to look like in terms of demographics and in terms of party affiliation. And so you can get the same answers from people on the telephone and report very different results depending on what your model is. And it's obvious to me that early on, most pollsters were using models that really way over-favored Joe Biden, and they'd report those results. And then it was just like 2016. Once you get within a week or so of the election, they start reporting different results, and they say, oh, President Trump is catching up. Well, I think he did mount a good effort there in the last couple of weeks. But I think part of it is I believe pollsters actually tweaked those turnout models so as to change the results. I don't see any other way to explain what's happened this year, just as it did 4 years ago.
Yeah, but I also don't rule out the shy voter syndrome. I mean, Conservatives had plenty of reason to keep their heads down and not tell pollsters exactly which way they're going to vote. But if Donald Trump does win, why do you think that is?
Well, I think he's done a great job as president. Gallup polls periodically, are you better off than you were 4 years ago? And a couple of months ago, 56% of respondents said, yeah, I'm better off than I was 4 years ago. Wages have been rising. Unemployment has been at record low levels. We've had the coronavirus issue, as everybody has, over the last 6 or 8 months. If it weren't for that, I think Trump probably would be winning in a landslide. But I think one of the things that we've seen, Andrew, is that he's been quite strong with Hispanic voters. That's why he won Florida easily. And he's stronger with black voters than he was 4 years ago. And I think that's down to a good economy that those people have really benefited from.
But what about the riots that started off in Minneapolis, in your state, took off around America? How much would that have played as a factor in the law and order issue, particularly for Trump?
Well, that's a factor, and it's definitely helped Trump, and it's helped some other Republicans as well. And for example, Wisconsin, had some terrible riots in a city called Kenosha. Trump actually went to Kenosha, and today he carried Kenosha by an overwhelming majority. So I think that illustrates, the significance of that issue and the fact that it has helped the president.
And finally, John, how will Donald Trump's second term, should he be re-elected, how's that going to change America?
Well, I think he can get a lot done in the second term. You know, the first term, it took him about a year and a half just to staff his administration. And the Democrats fought him tooth and nail on everything. We had the Russia hoax, you know, that they're obsessed with for over 3 years. And so it takes time to get an administration in place, to get rules adopted under the Administrative Procedure Act, to get legislation through Congress. I think if Trump is reelected, we're going to see a very, very productive second term.
I'll say the left is going to have to rejig how they approach things. Apparently abuse and intimidation and threatening and setting fire to cities does not work. Who would have thought? John Hinderaker, thank you so much indeed for your time.
Thank you, Andrew.